Shalom. We're continuing our exploration of maybe a crazy topic, which is exploring the boundaries of what it means to be human by looking at the laws of prayer, and specifically, what's the minimum level in order to be permitted or obligated to pray. And I'm making an assumption, but a playful guess that maybe to be able to pray has something to do with being human. So whether you agree with that or not, I think there's some interesting stuff here, and I want to look at two different examples or realms of Jewish law where prayer comes up. They're a bit esoteric, I would say. One is to do with being drunk, and at what point does a drunk person lose the ability to pray? And the other has to do with maybe a magical, maybe an imaginary creature called the golem. Okay, and there's been a lot written about golem stories and golem myths. And we'll get there, but I'm going to be looking specifically at the question about a golem praying. Now, let's start first things first. Okay, now, to be drunk, I don't know if you've ever had that experience. We have a statement in the Talmud that says that someone who is drunk, their acquisition is an acquisition, their sale is a sale. If they perform a transgression, a sin, a crime, then they get punished for it. And the last line is important. The principle is, he is like a sober person in all matters, except that he is exempt from prayer. Okay, so they're saying legally a drunk person has legal capacity, except that they can't pray, or they're not obligated to pray. Okay, and we'll see in a minute that that doesn't apply to all drunk people. There's gradations in that category of drunkenness. Okay, and we see that in the Shulchan Aruch itself, where we have a paragraph, quite a dense paragraph, which speaks of different situations of being drunk. And it starts with an ideal. Okay, I split this up into 1, 2, and 3. It's not necessarily... This is my separation. Okay, we start with the ideal. If one drank a revi'it of wine, he or she may not pray the Amidah prayer until the effects of the wine pass. Okay, so if one drinks quite a small amount, right? We're talking maybe 75, maybe 86 milliliters, maybe a bit more, but like a very small glass of wine. You're not allowed to pray until the effects of the wine pass. If you drink more than that, this is level 2, if you are able to speak before a king, then if you prayed, the prayer is considered a prayer. Okay? So that's kind of a middle category. If you drink a revi'it of wine, you shouldn't pray. But if you did, and you're in a situation where you could stand in front of a king, or you could speak in front of a king, then your prayer is a prayer. You did something. You counted. You don't have to repeat anything. And then level 3, if he is not able to speak before a king and he prayed, his prayer is an abomination, and he is required to pray again when the effects of the wine passes from him. Okay? So there we have a category of someone who's drunk and cannot stand before the king, speak before the king. then that's nothing. That prayer isn't prayer. Now, let's look at a bit of discussion about that. First of all, there's later sources that say this doesn't count. We don't listen to this anymore. Okay, we have a comment from the book Yam Shel Shlomo that says, and we've looked at this before, nowadays we don't have kavanah. Nowadays we don't have kavanah anyway, so we shouldn't be so strict about this. Because if we were strict about this, then we wouldn't get to prayer. Okay, so it's a little bit pessimistic there. But we don't have kavanah, and it's better to pray with a revi'it of wine in you than not to pray at all. And another comment of the Vilna Gaon brings in a different category, which is the category of drunk like Lot. Okay? And he says, all of this discussion is in the case of one who did not arrive at the drunken state of Lot. Because someone who did reach this level of drunkenness is completely mentally incapable and not obligated in anything, and anything they say is invalid. Okay, so we see this other category, which is invoked all over the place, of drunk like Lot. Lot, we have the story in Genesis of he escaped Sodom and with his two daughters, and they think they're the last people alive, and his daughters get him very, very drunk and sleep with him to the point that he doesn't know, according to the simple meaning of the text, he doesn't know that he had sexual relations with his daughters. So that level of drunk like Lot, like you just don't know what's going on, that's considered invalid, mentally incapable of prayer and probably everything else as well. All the things we said before about making a sale and buying things and transgressions, that there's a sense that someone's drunk like Lot isn't part of that. I'll come back to the aspect of speaking before the king, but already I wanted to say that there's a sense of reflection here, which seems to me important and connected to kavanah. Someone who's able to determine that they are drunk, and someone who's able to look at themselves and say, yes, I am drunk, but I'm about to speak before the king. I'm about to pray. So I have to act, at least. I have to pull myself together. It's not even a question of whether they can do that or not, but the noticing themselves. Am I ready to pray? Am I able to pray? That noticing of oneself is, I think, a prerequisite to kavanah. Right? Remember, the definition of kavanah is someone who sees themselves as if standing before the divine presence. Again, that seeing yourself as if requires a sense of self-knowledge, self-reflection, which I think is somewhere here in this scale of drunkenness. Okay, that's what we're playing with. Does this person have self-reflection or not? Let's go quickly to another source about the golem. Now, I've spoken about the golem before, and I've brought some of these sources before. What's interesting for me is, first of all, there's a kind of famous translation of Genesis by ancient proto-rabbi Onkelos. Onkelos translated the Torah into Aramaic, and that translation is considered authoritative. And kind of, you can learn a lot from that translation, and they learn law and halakha from the translation, and also matters of theology, I would say, or worldview. And in the story of the creation of man, where it says that God blew the breath of life into man, into mankind, and man became a living being, nefesh chaya, living being. Onkelos translates that phrase, living being, as speaking being. Okay? Translates nefesh chaya as ruach memalala. Living being becomes speaking being. Now, hold that for a moment, and we look at this story of, there's a Talmudic story of one of the rabbis, Rava, who created a man, who created a golem, and he sent this golem to speak to the other rabbis, and Rabbi Zera spoke to the golem, and he did not reply. Rabbi Zera said to him, "You were created by one of us, return to the dust." Okay, so Rabbi Zera basically deactivates the golem, sends him back to the dust. Okay, won't go into it too much, but there's been kind of an interesting discussion throughout the ages about whether that hypothetical golem, or whether that real golem, I don't know, whether that golem is human or not. And the angle they take is whether that golem could join a minyan, could be counted amongst the 10 people needed to pray properly in the Jewish sense. I've spoken before about the responsum of Chacham Tzvi, and there's another responsum of Yaakov Emden. There's an interesting one, though, by a Hasidic master, Rabbi Tzadok of Lublin. And Rabbi Tzadok, he has a dream diary. And one of his dreams, in the sixth dream in this diary, he dreamt about this halachic dispute of how to count a golem in a minyan. And he in his dream, he realized that the previous rabbis were wrong. And he said the previous rabbis assumed that if Rabbi Zera deactivated the golem, right? Told the golem to go back to the dust, that means that it's not a living being, because otherwise it might be murder, and that the golem can't be counted in a minyan, because otherwise Rabbi Zera wouldn't have killed him, wouldn't have destroyed him, because he has a purpose. But Rabbi Tzadok says that's not right, because maybe there's a different reason that Rabbi Zera killed him. Maybe the golem was dangerous. Again, he brings in proof from other golems which were created in Europe, in Chelm, and that's a whole different story. And he goes through thinking about different aspects of what it means to count, to be part of the community. And one of the approaches he brings is that the golem lacks a speaking soul. Okay, if the golem can't speak, since the golem can't speak, that means that it's not human enough to pray. Okay, and eventually he kind of rejects that approach, and he says, no, the golem isn't. It comes to the same conclusion. The golem can't pray as part of the minyan because the golem isn't obligated in the commandments, and there's no reward and punishment for golems. But, and then he says something very strange. He says, perhaps the golem could count as one of the 10 needed to say the blessing after meals. Like a child who is sometimes also included in this, since it knows to whom one is blessing. Okay, so he says there's another level of inclusion in prayer, which all you need to be able to do is to know to whom you are praying to. If you know to whom you are praying to, that's like a child, and sometimes we count a child in a minyan for specific things. So it says maybe a golem is on that level. That's That's interesting. Now, just maybe to summarize, and it's a bit of a long summary today. To summarize, I think what's holding all of this together is the ability to speak. Okay? There's a question of to pray is to be able to speak, and to maybe to be human is to be able to speak. Okay? And then that brings us to all these borderline cases about children, about golems, about drunk people. And the way we analyze those situations is, to what extent can they speak? To what extent is their speech really speech? To what extent do they mean what they say? And having some kind of knowledge of what you're doing, of what you're saying as you say it, that seems to be a condition for prayer. And again, that's interesting in terms of our journey, thinking about humanity, about artificial intelligence, about everything that's interesting and in our world, or soon to be in our world. Thank you for listening to this, and I guess see you next week.